Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 177 of Circle Up and Get Real, where by now you know this is all about talking about things that matter with people who matter. And today, my guest is a brand spanking new friend who I have met like 2 minutes ago, named Matthew Cooksey, who lives in Australia. And we connected very randomly, but not very randomly, Matt. We'll talk about that in a second. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Matt. He's a therapist, coach, truth seeker, and speaker. And Matt is on a mission to help people embrace their human mess. Humanness, but human mess. So we can all lead our best lives. Welcome, Matt.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Jody. It's just so cool that in this world you can connect with somebody, feel some flicker of depth, and like the next day be having a conversation for, a podcast. It's an amazing world we live in, even if it's a complicated world at the same time. And it's just a joy to be here. So thank you.
Yes. Oh, so well said, Matt. And Matt's coming to us from the future, everyone, because where Matt is, it's Saturday, and where I am, it's Friday. So that's just such a freaky thing too. So Matt, would you tell everybody how did we connect? And this is kind of new to me too, because this is just random in a way.
Yeah. So it was through listening to your podcast, and there was a particular episode about 3 weeks ago with an amazing guest you had, Ian Williams. And Ian was talking about how if we don't realize our own wholeness, then we will just go out in the world and create more brokenness. And when I heard that, it struck a chord in me so deeply, because that is what my work is all about, what my life has been all about. I grew up, I joke with people that I feel like I came out of the womb ashamed of myself, because I really, for the largest part of my life, felt like there was something wrong with me, that I was broken, that I was ugly, that I was unlovable, all of these things. And to be sitting here at 43 years old and to be now living from a deeply realized understanding of my own and all of our perfection. And I don't mean perfectionism in a perfectionistic kind of way. I mean the perfection that lays at the heart of every human being on this planet. To be in touch with that, having grown up feeling so utterly broken, is just so wild to me. And that is what drives me to really share this message, that no matter what you've been through, no matter how stuck you feel, that there is this place within all of us from which you can live your life, which is whole and complete and innately generous. And I heard a conversation with Ian and you that felt innately generous. And so I was like, I'm gonna send Jody an email and tell you obviously about the work I'm doing in the world, and see if it would serve the people listening here to actually have a conversation. And hey presto, here we are.
I said earlier to someone I was talking with today about how coincidences seem so random. And when I kept saying this is a random invitation that we've made for each other, it's not at all. And when you think about coincidence, that word coincidence actually means coinciding. It's happening exactly the way it needs to. It's not an accident. It's not random. It's coincident. It happens to be happening at the same time. And so I never question these kinds of things when they feel right to me. And when you reached out and I looked you up, you felt right to me. And I can't really explain it any better than that either, Matt. But
Well, I love what you're expressing, because I've had to really re-educate my mind about synchronicity, about serendipity,
Mhm.
about the notion that that in a way you could say like that magic
Mhm.
is like the exception, and improbable, and actually my experience more and more in life as I live out of this place in myself that it feels whole to me.
Mm.
It also feels that as I live out of that place, I'm living out of my connection to all of life. And
Mm.
therefore these synchronicities and these connections seem to happen more and more frequently, to the point where my mind's like, are you like, is this really happening? Are
I
you
know.
like, and I'm like, seriously, mind, this is just how it is. Like, actually, this is how it actually is when you're
Yeah.
not constantly trying so hard.
Yeah. That seems so counterintuitive. And I don't know how it is in Australia, but in America, how I was raised was that things have to be hard and you earn your worthiness based on how much hard work you're willing to do. And I didn't question that because it's just what was, but it never felt right to me. I just didn't have language or experience for that. Is it
Oh
similar
my,
to that in Australia?
oh, absolutely. I mean, I actually grew up in the UK and
Okay.
then moved here about 12 years ago.
Mhm.
And it's really just the same philosophy everywhere I've certainly lived. And I was certainly raised in that culture where it's all about results.
Yeah.
You know, the starting point for a human being is, well, you're okay. Like there's something weird goes on. Like we're born as little babies. I've got like 3 children under 4, and I look at these little babies, these little toddlers, and I notice other people's reactions to them, and other people see them, and they're almost universally loving and embracing of them at that age.
Mhm.
And then something seems to happen in how we, I don't know what age it is we get to, whether it's like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or somewhere in there. And suddenly the emphasis shifts. And
Mm.
suddenly it's like, okay, guys, you're now no longer perfect, beautiful
Mm.
human beings. You have something to prove.
Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
got something to prove. And okay, we'll set you up to prove it and we'll help you. Like life is like, we'll help you prove
Mhm.
that you are enough, and we'll lay out a whole pathway, a whole gamut of different options, a smorgasbord of ways to prove yourself. And then we just assume that that's right.
Yeah.
We take the bait, I think. And
Mhm.
that's what I think I hear you saying is like, we just take the bait and then we just like start running with that paradigm of life, and it covers up the reality
Yeah.
underneath.
Yeah.
And it makes us live a life that is full of striving, full of stress,
Mhm.
and ultimately very self-conscious as well.
So all of that, yes. And you started this conversation by saying, I came out of the womb not feeling good enough. So let's go back there. Were you 1, 2, 3, 4 years old and beautiful and perfect, or did something happen?
Right. I mean, well, objectively now I can almost look back and I can see that I was perfect
Mhm.
all along, that I was just this beautiful little child
Mhm.
who, yeah, was just absolutely gorgeous and sweet and kind and funny. But at the time, as a child, I, like I said, I laugh about this now, but it wasn't funny to be living with this belief
Yeah.
about myself. And it goes back as long as I can really remember. I mean, there's one of my first memories in life is being in like a kindergarten, and it was like the rare one summer's day in England that it's not like pouring with rain. And all the kids were, it's the 80s, so all the kids are like nude and going in like a paddling pool at
Yeah.
the kindergarten. And I have this vivid memory of crying and saying I refusing to take my clothes off because I felt ugly at, like, I don't know, 3 years old.
Mm.
And this obviously has been passed, I believe, from generation to generation in my family, because whatever the specific manifestation of this, like, not enough feeling is, and I personally believe we all have an element of that feeling, not enough.
Yeah.
And it's a spectrum for most people. But I saw that now, as I look back, this lineage of the story, not enough, being passed from generation to generation. And, I was talking with my mum a few months ago, and we were talking about my grandparents, and they were these incredible musicians. They were the kind of people who, when they walked into a room, they lit the room up, and everyone was jealous of them. But because they didn't have the kind of wealth and the symbols of success that a lot of their friends had, they felt they never really recognized what it was that they had.
Wow.
And so the sad thing about this, this belief that we are encultured into at such an early age that we're not enough, is it blinds us to our gifts, to the other day, this is going to sound almost narcissistic, but it actually felt very beautiful. The other day I was at my brother's apartment, and I was in the lift. And bear in mind, this is the 3-year-old who didn't want to take his clothes off at the kindergarten. And there was, all these lifts have those mirrors in. And I looked in the mirror and I thought, God, you're handsome. And then my next thought was, how did I not know this? How did I spend all my life believing that, this story, that in one way or another, I was not enough? And so it's really insidious. I think it begins very early in life, and it's a story. The story of not enough just gets passed from generation to generation. And I am absolutely determined that not just with my kids, but with the wider world, that we will end this story of not enough and begin to realize who we really are.
Bless you. Yay. Everyone, I hope you heard that, not just with your ears, but with your hearts and souls, because anybody listening to this is why this podcast exists. This is why synchronicities and random happenings happen in my life and probably in your life, Matt. So I want to know from you, okay, we're 5 years old, or 3 years old actually, and you're thinking less of yourself and you're recognizing that you're not enough. Tell me about how you got where you are today. Is this a new awareness for you, or did you come to this slowly, quickly? Tell me more.
Oh my goodness. It's like, it almost feels like an overnight thing that happened in like 20 years.
Yeah.
It's everything all at once. Like all good stories, it begins with a breakdown. And I'm 43 now. And for me, I really can see that this awakening began in my late 20s. I was working in a corporate job, and I was like, in many ways, I was very fortunate, because in addition to this whole feeling of shame and not enough and all that, I did have this other part of myself that felt like I was brilliant and capable and smart. But the problem is, when you've got both those things going on, and I think this is a lot of people, then one, it's like living in a carrot and stick world. You are simultaneously running away from a stick and trying to get the carrot at the same time. which means your life is very preoccupied.
Yeah.
So I was leading a very preoccupied, successful life.
Mhm.
And I actually discovered the book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle when I was about 28. And
Okay.
I'd never been exposed to any kind of spirituality prior to that. It was just little old me, this little Matthew on the planet, and, you know, vulnerable and separate. And that was my whole concept.
Mhm.
And then I listened to the audiobook as I was driving around. I had this beautiful but disgusting realization that I was never, ever living in the now, ever.
Yeah.
And it was so, like, my anxiety went through the roof. I'm like, isn't this book meant to be helping me? But actually,
Ah.
what it was doing was it was exposing this dis-ease
Mhm.
that derives out of never feeling enough, and therefore always living in the future, always living for some mentally created moment in the future where you imagine that you might arrive finally at a place of success or achievement, and therefore always missing the moment. And
Yeah.
so my mum walked into my house on my 30th birthday, and she said, "Happy birthday," like this. And I just burst into tears because I didn't know. She said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I've no idea. I've no idea what's wrong." Because, like a lot of people, I had all the things that we're told should make us happy: the
Mhm.
house, the car, the career, all of that kind of stuff. But I was in this place of confusion. And that day I took myself off to the gym, and I was running on this treadmill. And this cracks me up, this story, because it's such a great metaphor. So if you can picture this, I'm pounding this treadmill because I'm like, I've got to, like, striving, I got to get out of this terrible feeling, because I didn't know how to feel my feelings back
Yeah.
then at all. I was habitually pushing all these feelings away.
You and almost everyone else.
Thank you for saying that. Absolutely. Well, we're not, that's another thing another memo we don't get in our early lives. So there I am, like, pounding away on this treadmill, and suddenly my water bottle falls off the treadmill and trips me up, and I literally fall off the treadmill, the road to nowhere.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, that didn't, dawn on me at the time. And I was like, at this lowest ebb, I was like, here I am trying to pick myself up, trying to make myself feel better, and life is against me, and life hates me, and I'm not good enough, and I'm never going to be good enough. And I went downstairs to this huge, like, jacuzzi thing that they had at this gym. And I got into that jacuzzi the most depressed and unhappy I think I'd ever been. And as I sat there, it was almost like this psychological self that was grounded in the notion of not being enough, but if we do X, Y, and Z, then maybe one day we could be enough. Suddenly just gave up. It gave up. It surrendered. It reached the end of the line. It bowed down and said, I am out of options,
Wow.
And it just went quiet. And I heard this voice that sounded like me, but sounded nothing like me. And it just said, you don't have to do any of this. You don't have to do any of this. And it was honestly like a moment where the clouds parted. And in retrospect, what I realize is that I was actually hearing my true self consciously for the first time.
Right.
And I sat there and I heard this with this profundity, this, like, it was almost like my mind then went, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
Because it was so, like, although those words sound simple, they felt they had such weight.
Right.
And in that moment, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to give all this up. I'm going to give up this career. I'm going to leave this place. And I got out of that jacuzzi joyful, excited. And my mind was trying to catch up with this and was going, well, that was weird.
Yeah.
You don't normally experience such a rapid shift from misery to joy.
Yeah.
And that has happened quite a number of times. And as a therapist, thank God I know about mental health enough to know that what I was experiencing was not some kind of pathology, but actually an awakening to my essential nature. And really at that point, that's when the journey really started. And that was like 13 years ago. And so this realization, this transition from feeling insufficient, incomplete, always searching for more, to be more, has really matured over those 13 years, but particularly, I would say, in the last 2 years, probably since I had kids, that's played a role as well. And it's been the most wild, like, since that getting out of that jacuzzi, the serendipity, the breakdowns, the breakthroughs, oh my God, that's a whole other podcast episode.
And we'll do that. We're gonna do that because I really want to get there. I want to go back to now 30. Let's go back to, you said you're a therapist. You kind of alluded to that. So I'd like to go before the jacuzzi. You're on the treadmill, like almost literally, of your life, right? You said the path to nowhere. And tell me about your upbringing before that. So you went to university, what was?
Yeah. I mean, I also had grappled as a teen with being gay, realizing I was gay, and really suppressing that, growing up in a very homophobic culture, already, as we've talked about, feeling bad about myself. And then as a teenager, realizing that was like this additional layer, this dirty secret. And I couldn't even let myself in on that secret. It's like I knew, but I didn't even know. And so throughout my school years and then into early adulthood, all of these layers of hiding meant that I was so out of touch with my own soul or my own spirit, or however you want to think about that I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a successful student. I was a really good boy. I was applying myself. So I was quite academically successful. And so but I had no idea how to use that. And I think today, the thing that, I am so passionate about for myself and in my life is that right at the heart of life, there seems to be this impulse to contribute. I think there are so many of the people I work with, they know that they're here to contribute something. And when you're not doing that, when you're caught up in all your insecurities, as I was, it actually aches to know that you're here for something, but to not be fully bringing that to bear in the world. And so my biggest challenge back then was like, I just was so disconnected internally that there was no guidance that was allowing me to see to gravitate towards things that would really be in tune with me. Like I always joke, like I'm a deep fish. Like I'm like one of those fish in one of those David Attenborough documentaries that swims at 10,000 meters down in the dark with like an ear on its nose. And, like when I swim up to the shallows, I freaking scare people, like I'm best to be swimming down in the deep, asking these deep questions with fellow deep fish like you.
Right.
Like that's also what I got when I listened to you, Jody. I was like, oh, this is a deep fish. Like,
Yeah.
I want to swim with Jodie. Like this would be great. And so for me, it was so difficult at that point to actually recognize those gifts, the gifts of this sensitivity, the gifts of this deep thinking, because I was so out of touch. And so I went to university. I did a business degree because I just didn't know what I wanted to do. My uncle worked in corporate sales, and surprise, surprise, I got into corporate sales for like 10 years because, you know, when you don't have that inner guidance and that inner knowing, well, what do? Of course, you look outside, you look to other people, you look to what somebody else thinks, which then obviously creates a whole other problem in itself, that you're not really living your life, and that's gonna make you feel even more self-conscious. So that's kind of the trajectory of
so
where I ended up.
then I'm hearing you say that for those, what would that have been, you know, 22 to 30, for those 8 years, you just did what you thought you needed to do. You suppressed all of your heart and soul, because you didn't know what else to do. And who does? I'm just here to say, being on that treadmill, having the awareness of Eckhart Tolle with The Power of Now, your mom, the jacuzzi, all of those things. Do you think it was just like in that 30-year moment, it was sort of, is that when it started to come out then, that I'm not being true to me?
That's right. I mean, I think it probably really started to kick off when I finally came out to everybody about being gay. Which I didn't do until I was 25.
Okay.
So at 25, it became unbearable to hide that anymore. And it's interesting, I've got 3 brothers, and 2 of my brothers are gay as well. So 3 out of 4 kids are gay. And so in a way that sent me even more into the closet. People are like, wouldn't that have made it easier? But you have to see that I was so focused on being a good boy that I wanted to be the kid, be the adult that I thought and imagined my parents wanted me to be. And so I just repressed that whole thing. And so I think it was like when I finally came out, it was like opening Pandora's box. And suddenly, in one sphere of my life, finally, I was actually starting to, you know, date the people I actually wanted to date. It put me back in touch with this more authentic self. But that's by no means, I think, a guarantee that you're going to, like, there's something interesting about what that sparked in me, because really since particularly that that kind of awakening in my early 30s, there has been this relentless search that itself for many years contributed even more to the sense of not enough, but ultimately delivered a breakthrough. This relentless search for, who am I? What am I? And as time has gone on, as that has matured, it's become less of a psychological kind of question and more of a spiritual inquiry, really, like, what actually am I? And what is this human experience all about? How does it actually work? And where am I in this? Like,
so listeners, I need you to know that this is, if you're not being honest with yourself, you're suppressing those questions for yourself, because I will tell you that I bet every single human has those same questions, but most people deny them or suppress them or get busy so that they don't have to listen to those questions coming up, because we are created, and I'm going to go a little bit, we are created in the image and likeness of a creator that is greater than all of us. We are humans, sure, but we are having a human experience as a spiritual being. And that's just what is for me in my truth of truths. So if we're not allowing that process to open us up the way Matt's describing it right now, everyone, then you're actually only living a very small portion of the possibility of the life you could be living and the people you could be impacting. And so when you talk about that, Matt, I mean, this journey that you're on, that you're exploring and you're explaining, I really believe is a human experience, but the human as a spiritual being.
Totally. I think for the longest time, I was just this, as I said before, I was just this human being, vulnerable, gonna die, gotta make it, you know, very, very narrow, scary, in a way, stressful life when that's what you believe about what you are. And I can understand how, you know, religion gives people a baked in kind of escape route from that kind of vulnerability. But what I've loved about my own path is that in a way life found me. I didn't, you know, being gay, religion seemed to be kind of off the agenda because, you know, they're probably gonna, I know this is not true for all religious people, but you know, there's a discomfort being gay. And you know, I would consider myself to be, you know, a student of Jesus, of the Buddha, of, you know, the great avatars of history.
Right.
But really my experience was that life grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and it kind of said, dude, you're not alone. You're not alone. And actually you are made of something so much greater than you and your mind have grasped. And you got to find out. You got to find out about that. And it was like, and me, life, I'm going to help you, but you got to play ball with that.
Yeah.
And so for like, as I went through my life trying to then recreate my life, I went back to uni and became a therapist, and then created a therapy practice, and then that evolved into coaching and spiritual work. There was this continual dance in how I was creating that work. Many, many times it was still creating from this little me who felt separate and was trying to do it all still, now trying to help people, trying to heal people. But when you really looked under the hood, where was the motivation coming from? And I think to your point about honesty and self-honesty, really what it was about was proving myself still. And so the tension of saying, and I see this a lot in the work I do, where I'm guiding people who want to make change in the world, and this tension that they feel when they say, and they really mean it, it's very authentic when they say that they want to contribute to a better world in some way, whether that's an entrepreneurial thing, whether it's a leadership thing, whether it's an artistic thing, whatever it is. But then when the fuel, when the source of their activity, of their actual journey to embody and make that change in the world is actually coming from a sense of insufficiency and trying to prove yourself, there is this horrible tension people feel between the intent and the reality behind what's really driving them. And that gap, which you can see in like Maslow's work, where you look at his pyramid and at the very top, you've got self-actualization, where people are not doing something to get somewhere. They're just doing it because they inherently love what they're doing. When you're not just doing the thing because you love to do the thing, like right now, I have a feeling in this conversation, you and I are doing this. We're having this conversation because we are loving having this conversation.
Yes.
When you're doing the thing to get something else, you feel ick. And that I see stops so many brilliant visionary people from making the difference that I know that they are born to make, because the fuel is dirty. The fuel is dirty, and it pollutes your own soul with self-consciousness and self-doubt, imposter syndrome, people pleasing, all of these things. And it hurts. You can't, I don't think you can do it that way.
Well, I think you can do it that way. You can continue to do and make and force, and you can do it that way, but you won't impact, you won't transcend, you won't have that opportunity to step into what it feels like to be authentic, even though it's scary.
Totally. I so hear you when you say that, and you're so right. You can do it that way, because I definitely did do it that way. But I guess what I'm getting at is it wasn't able to, what I felt in my heart I wanted to create was not able to flourish with that, from that way of being. And it was only when I could find this inner generosity that suddenly, like even just showing up for this conversation today, many moons ago, when it was all about me, all of that identity about not enough that I grew up with would get activated, right? And so now I would be in this conversation worried about whether or not this is going to be enough. Is Jody happy with me? Is this going to be okay? And then trying really hard to make sure it is okay, that it is, and so much self-consciousness, so much taking you away from just being the simplicity of being in the moment. And so things have really taken off for me since I was able to really build and create and contribute from this wholeness that needs nothing from anyone.
Yeah. So I'm sensing that the outside you, like, you don't look a lot different. I mean, you have joy in your face, so I see the joy in your face, but I wonder if people who have been around you are like, something's different, or if you're just still the you've always been, and inside you know that your energy is more magnetic than dynamic now.
Well, it's because having grown up in England and now living on the other side of the world in Australia, going back to England is like digging up a time capsule, because I go back and I see my old friends who knew me 10, 13 years ago at that time, because actually there's a coincidence, to go back to that word, of when I had that jacuzzi realization. Very rapidly after that, I left the UK and moved to Australia. And so it really does feel like, and I just came back from London about 3 weeks ago, and I met up with a bunch of my friends. And one of my friends said to me, like, this person's really, really dear to me. And we really bonded over, in our early life at school, over feeling so terrified about life, feeling so insecure. Like, that was really the basis of our relationship. And I walked into this pub to see her, and she burst into tears, and she's going through some really painful stuff in her life, and it's really difficult. And and I just held her, but I wasn't crying. And she just looked at me and she said, are you not like, aren't we going to like do at least a little bit of drama? Like, that's the deal between us. Like, that's the deal. We're both like living this dramatic life. And so I do see that mirror from people back in England that says, what has changed? She said to me, how are you doing it? You seem so, like, we bonded over being like living this roller coaster existence. And she's like, you seem so level these days. You seem so like okay about even when things aren't okay. Because like, I've got 3 kids under 4.
I know.
It's
wow.
Full on. My life is screwed. It's like absolutely screwed. Like, if you could see my house, like I'm recording this in my laundry because my children will like wake up and they will come and scream, and you know, my life's a mess. And yet this connection to this sense of wholeness allows me to go through actually some quite horrific things and stay grounded, stay connected to this okayness. And I think that's what she was saying to me just a few weeks ago. And I really felt for her, because without a connection to this, you know, and she's a very successful lawyer and, you know, all of this stuff, but it's so painful to live like that. And that's the message that I want people to hear, is that no matter how up and down and roller coaster-ish you feel, there is a place inside you that is unmoved by the things that scare you, stress you, disturb you, and you can find it. And I like to say to people, if I can, because I was so awful to myself, so awful to myself. If I can find this place, then I truly believe anyone can. I truly believe that.
So there are you said it earlier, there are surface fish and there are fish who exist in the depths, and the deeper you go, the calmer it gets. Right? I mean, the ocean is
true.
Yeah. So if you want to go here, and I wouldn't even say want to, because it's not always something I don't know if we would choose the work it takes to become self-aware if we knew how much work it was. But on the other side of all the work that we were doing when we were doing hard work to keep everything away from the truth, you know, comparatively speaking, I'd choose the hard work over self-awareness way over the work of keeping it, you know, from my awareness. So if people are looking for a way to do some of that hard work, which you can be witnessed with someone like you, Matt, I'm guessing that's your mission now. This is what you're on, a mission to help people embrace their human mess.
Yeah, I truly believe that until we can at first find some curiosity about the parts of ourselves that we don't like or that we struggle with, to make it really concrete. Most people have a part of them that is very self-critical, that is always coming in after they've just said something or posted something with judgment. What I've experienced is that for the longest time, the other parts of me fought tooth and nail against that critical part. There was this gargantuan internal war going on between the parts of me that were kind of creating a sort of narrative that said, you're wonderful and you're great and you can do things in the world and you can make a difference and all of that stuff. And this part that seemed so dysfunctional, part of the history of being broken. And for the longest time, I just tried to get rid of it. I just tried to push it away because it was so crashing in its criticism and judgment and just destroying of my joy and love of life. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work because it's a part of you. You cannot get rid of a part of you, no matter how you try. And so finally, what I did and what I now teach in my work is I was able to find some curiosity about that part of myself that was really dominant in my early life. I was able to find some curiosity about it, some compassion, in a way to even like sit with it and talk to it. Because I think one of the fundamental things people need to grasp that that is not well known at all is that this psychological self, that this garden variety self that we live from most days, is not the singular unitary self that we've been taught. You know how you, like, if you're going out, someone says, do you want to go out for dinner? And you go, oh, you know, part of me wants to go see my friend, but part of me would just love to lay on the couch and drink a glass of wine.
Mm-hmm.
This self that we have, to me anyway, very clearly seems to be divided into a number of parts. And when we are trying to, or when we believe that it is a singular self, that self looks bizarre then. It looks schizophrenic. That's how it appears to be broken, because you've got essentially different parts of yourself with different agendas for your life, all competing for the steering wheel. And they're, depending on what's going on, one part's jumping in this situation, another part's jumping. And this just adds to our sense of being fragmented and incomplete. Whereas if you actually start to see this, for me, what I was then able to do is the me that is this higher self, that is not caught up in this psychological self, was then able to sit with this critical part of me and really relate to it differently and start to embrace it. And what I have found is that, and I never saw this coming, that critical part of me has morphed into a champion, an advocate. It is a part of me that is authoritative. If you think about like an inner critic, they're very authoritative. They will tell, that part of you will tell you that you're crap with real authority. So when you can heal that part of yourself, when you can relieve that part of the burden that it carried from your early life, all of a sudden it turns outward into the world. And now it has me speaking right now in a way that conveys a sense of conviction. And without unlocking that part of me, I lack conviction. I blow in the wind. I focus on what you're thinking about this and whether you like it, as opposed to having the conviction that this is my experience and I'm going to tell it, and it's up to you. You can decide whether you agree with it or disagree, whatever. It's okay. And that's the magic this part has helped me find.
Boy, that says something to me too. That really speaks to me. I hope you heard that, everybody who's listening to this. What I heard in that, Matt, is you said a champion. I really like that. An advocate for your higher self. So if you have to be divided into two, why not have your authority figure fight for you instead of against you? Right. In that space, then, what I'm hearing you say is it's about integration, not about separation. And we might have been trained and taught and conditioned that we have, like you said, have to get rid of that, cut it out, make sure that that isn't a part of you. But it is. And it's the integration, which then I wrote is, you're exuding confidence right now, not arrogance. And so when we go back to you being in the elevator, the lift, looking in the mirror and saying, you're very handsome, that comes from a place of, no, hear this, that comes from a place of what is, instead of a place of, let me convince you of something, right? And so I'm hearing also that, I don't know, this is my opinion, I could be wrong about this, but I think fear is what keeps us safe and kind of lights up our fight or flight. And there is a time and place for that. If a train is coming and we have to get, out of the way, of course we need fight or flight. But everything that doesn't threaten our physical survival is inauthentic fear. And
hello, that's so good. That's so good. Inauthentic fear. Right.
And our body doesn't know the difference, our lower mind doesn't know the difference. It's still the same. There's stress, that affects us, but it can be eustress or distress. I played basketball in college, and there was eustress. There was that stress that had me be excited before the opening tip. EU, like euphoria, eustress. Compared to distress, which takes us down physically. If I'm in eustress too long, I'm going to have the same physical effects. It's not going to work in my best interest. So that's why I love what you said about your friend who noticed that you're more even, and that if you can be in the space of Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now and A New Earth and all of the things he's teaching us, it's about being present here now And you've described this so well, not worrying about what I think of you or what others, are projecting their own fear on. If we can just reflect and be that for each other, that's the beauty of this.
And I've noticed in this conversation, because we're obviously on video and a lot of people can be listening to just the audio. So I've been seeing your face. And what I've noticed is that you are also in this deep place of presence as we're having this conversation. And what it makes me get excited about is the possibility of how we as human beings might live and work and create as we find more capacity within ourselves to live from this very present state. It's so amazing to watch you really receiving what I'm saying. And it's almost as if I can feel your questions emerging in the moment out of just the spontaneity of life. And it's so beautiful. It's such a different relational experience. So I just so appreciate that we are in this, that we're speaking about intellectually right now. And I hope people listening can get a feel for the quality of this way of relating that is possible for all human beings. Well,
and keep in mind, everybody, we didn't know each other before an hour ago.
Right.
So this is available in the whole universe. We are connecting right now through this wonderful technology called Zoom, which lets us be, you're on Saturday, I'm on Friday, we're in different parts of the world. So energy is truly non-geographic. And when we're present no matter where we actually are in the physical part of our lives. And the fact that you reached out to me, the fact that you were moved by a conversation I had with someone else, all of these weird little synchronicities had to happen in order for this conversation to be created. It's really improv. We're demonstrating improv right here, because none of this was scripted. None of this was even planned. At least I didn't plan it. I don't know that you planned it. We're just,
yeah, I think it's so cool to also recognize that we probably both do have an intention here. There is an intention, and for you, your podcast and each episode really conveys that intention. And I have an intention. My intention is to help people, as we said at the top, work through their human mess so that they can realize this wholeness at the center of their being. But aside from that, I don't know how best to manifest that in a conversation with you for this group of people. I have no idea. That's way above my pay grade. My job is to just like show up empty, have that intention, and then let life lead the conversation as it has done so beautifully. And
it feels like 10 minutes and it's been an hour. So I mean, I just want to be respectful of both of our time. Yeah. I anticipate, Matt, that this is the beginning of many more conversations for us, with the intention of simply connecting and maybe demonstrating some of the opportunity that can exist for people who are looking and open. So if people wanted to get a hold of you and learn more about you, how would they best do that?
Yeah. So at my website, matthewcooksey.com, I have a free download called 9 Signs You Have a Masterpiece Trapped Inside You. And that really is an outgrowth of my belief that right now on this planet, we have all the visionaries that we need to solve the intractable problems in the world. The trouble is they're not creating and in touch with their higher selves, and therefore they don't have the conviction, the confidence, the self-belief, the just the power and the endurance to actually fulfill what they feel they can create in their lives. So you can go download this 9 signs, because each of those signs will help you start to get more of a sense of exactly where your life's work is getting stuck inside you. And it will really start to narrow that down a little bit for you, so that you at least kind of get a sense of, okay, like this is the movement within my mind and within my emotional body that is constricting and impeding the flow of life out in through me into the world. And it's like a diagnostic kind of thing in a way. That makes it sound very fancy. And it's really just it's a PDF that you can download. But I have had people say they print it out, they stick it on their wall, you know, like it's something that can really like live with you and serve you over a period of time to kind of keep coming back to. So come to the website. There's also a like a short whiteboard animation video there where I'm kind of encapsulating a lot of this in like 3 minutes. So these are all the things that you can find there just by subscribing there. And it's just, for anyone who considers doing that, it's a great privilege to really connect with you in that way. And I'm always open to people replying to the emails they get from me. I love to hear from people. I love to know where they're at on their journey. And I almost always reply to people because I love to be doing this work in connection with the people who are the deep fish, brave enough to swim down to the depths. So that'd be another.
So please take action, people. If you are called to this, do something. I love that people are inspired for a second, and then if they go back onto their own treadmills of life, they might need to fall off before they take action, like you did, literally have to fall off. Don't wait for that, everybody. If you get the message, you don't have to wait for the lesson. If you get the lesson, you don't have to wait for the problem or the crisis. You can take action right away. Reach out to Matthew. I'm guessing you'd be happy to connect with anybody who feels moved to do that with you. And I am grateful for your friendship. I'm going to call you a friend now, even though we've just met today. And thank you, Matt, for being with me. And as always, everyone, get real. We'll talk again. Take care, everybody.